Welcome! Today, we're going to tear down one of the most powerful ideas in human history, the enemy. We're going to look at the architecture of how we build villains, not just in movies, but in our own minds and even in our societies. So let's just jump right in with the big one.
I mean, really think about that for a second. It's the central question, isn't it? When we look at any conflict, our first instinct is to find the good guys and the bad guys. But what if those roles aren't something we discover? What if there's something we actively create?
It feels like it's in our DNA. From the oldest myths we have to the latest superhero movie. The story's almost always the same, right? You've got a pure-hearted hero fighting some kind of ultimate evil. We're just wired to see the world that way, because it's simple, it's exciting, and it gives us a clear team to root for. So, if this good versus evil story is so universal, you have to ask, where did it come from? Is it just a handy trick for telling stories? Or is it pointing to something way deeper about how our minds work? Well, it turns out the blueprint for this conflict, it's not out there in the world. It's built right inside of us.
So our investigation doesn't start with history books or battlefields. It starts inside our own heads. Turns out, our brains kind of come pre-installed with an enemy creation engine, a set of processes that are just running in the background, shaping how we see everything. And one of the key players here is something called the default mode network, or the DMN. The easiest way to think about it is as your brain's inner storyteller. Its main job is to constantly spin the narrative of you, who you are, what you've been through, what you believe. It's always on, building and defending your personal story. But here's the catch. When this network gets overactive, when it isn't playing nicely with the other parts of your brain, that story of you gets really rigid. It becomes super defensive, we get locked into our own little world, and anything that challenges our story feels like a huge threat. And what does the mind do? It instinctively starts to project that feeling of being threatened onto someone else. And this kicks off this powerful psychological chain reaction. First, you've got the unintegrated mind. We all have parts of ourselves we don't like, our anger, our greed, our fears. The psychologist Carl Jung called this our shadow. Second, because we can't stand to look at it in ourselves, we project it. We throw that shadow onto someone else. And third, boom, that other person or group is now the perfect villain carrying all the stuff we refuse to see in ourselves. This leads to a pretty wild insight, right? The enemy we see out there is so often just a reflection of a battle happening in here. The more divided we are on the inside, the more we desperately need villains on the outside to make our story make sense. Okay, so that's the blueprint for one person. But how does this personal psychological quirk get blown up into huge social and political conflicts? Well, it happens through what you could call the myth-making machine, a process that takes our internal enemy engine and puts it on steroids for the masses. Every successful movement, every ideology, they all use this same basic playbook. Rule 1, polarize everything. Your side is pure good. Their side is pure evil. No gray areas. Rule 2, compress the story. Take a super complex history and boil it down to a simple tale where your side is always the victim and never the aggressor. And Rule 3, capture the symbols. You aren't just fighting for your group. You are fighting for freedom, for justice, for light itself. You can see this perfectly in pop culture. Think about the Jedi and the Sith. The Jedi have their own issues, right? They suppress emotion, deny their shadow, and claim this total moral purity. The Sith do the opposite. They weaponize their pain and say power is the only thing that's real. Now, both are pretty unbalanced, but because the Jedi won and got to write the history, their specific brand of imbalance gets called virtue, while the other side's is called pure evil. So at the end of the day, myth-making isn't about telling the truth. It's a battle over framing. The whole point is to make your particular imbalance, your particular way of seeing the world, feel like it's the only moral and righteous one there is. And this brings us to the final, and let's be honest, the most powerful layer of this whole thing. We've seen how the enemy is built in the mind, how it's scaled up through myth, but ultimately, it's power that decides which myth gets to be called history. George Orwell just nailed it with this line. If you win the battle today, in the present, you get the power to rewrite yesterday. You get to control the archives, the schools, the stories a whole society tells itself about where it came from. And this control goes even deeper. The philosopher Michel Foucault argued that truth isn't some pure thing we just find lying around. He said it's actually produced by the powerful institutions in a society,
the governments, the media, who get to set the rules for what even counts as a fact in the first place.
So, if power controls the past and even shapes what we all agree is true, then it follows that the characters in that story are also constructed. This is the final piece of the puzzle. History isn't just a random list of events, it's a narrative, and the winner gets to decide who gets plotted into the role of the hero and who gets cast as the villain.
So the ultimate prize in any major conflict isn't just land or resources. It's winning authorship over reality itself. The victor defines what's legitimate, they name good and evil, and their version of the story becomes the version of the story.
Okay, so if the whole hero-villain dynamic is a construct of our minds, our myths, and our power structures, is there another way? Can we actually see the world outside of this frame? Let's take a look. This really lets us compare two totally different ways of seeing things. On the one hand, you've got the familiar dualistic view. It's a battle of good versus evil, one side has to be right, and the goal is to just get rid of the enemy. But an integrated or systems view shows us something else. It sees two opponents locked in a kind of structural tension. And in this view, the conflict isn't just a problem to be solved, it's actually a source of pressure that could, if we understand it, lead to transformation for everybody involved. There's this incredible quote from the poet Rumi that just perfectly captures this shift in perspective. It's not about saying there's no right or wrong. It's about stepping outside that simple, judgmental frame and into a space, a field, where you can see the larger system that holds both sides.
And this is really the key takeaway here. The most powerful move isn't to just flip the script and argue that the bad guys were actually the good guys. The real game changer is to zoom out and see the entire architecture, the psychology, the myths, the power that produces these categories of hero and villain to begin with. Seeing that system, that's where the real insight is. And so I'll leave you with this question. If we could just for a moment suspend that deep, instinctual need to find an enemy, to cast a villain in our personal stories or our national ones, what would we be forced to see instead? What new ideas, what deeper truths might be waiting for us in that space? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.